So let's do a great big summary of all the Warhammer 40k releases that Games Workshop have revealed and are coming up so far, and round up some teasers and guesses for all the stuff that they haven't revealed. Hello and welcome back to Allspecs Tactics, where today we're talking through Games Workshop's upcoming Warhammer 40k release schedule, and as mentioned, doing a bit of an overview roundup of all the vast amount of stuff that they've teased to us or shown off over the past few months. It seems that even with the end of the Codex release cycle, there's plenty more coming for the grim darkness of the far future, and we've certainly got hints and expectations that there's plenty more to come yet. Games Workshop haven't really given us a proper 40k roadmap or teaser for a little while now. The last one that we had was the end of the Codex release schedule, then teasers of the chapter-specific Space Marine releases and the Leagues of Votann, and it seems that we're already past that with the release of Codex Drukhari. At the same time though, Games Workshop have been drip-feeding a whole bunch of reveals, often on Mondays and Fridays, and it seems that we've got several release waves either confirmed or some very strong hints as to what's coming. Starting out, we've got their current promo miniatures. There's two Genestealer Cult ones for 2025, a Pure Strain Genestealer clutching a Terminator head called Biosigns Terminated. That's the store anniversary one, so that could be a release near you if your Games Workshop store hasn't had its store birthday thing yet. And there's an alternative Sculpt Primus, which is an event exclusive miniature, so usually available at the actual events where Games Workshop attends in person. They often do make a showing at a lot of the bigger tournaments and conventions. Both quite fun miniatures. I do quite like the Space Hulk vibe of the Genestealer. They're maybe not quite as broad appeal as some of their event exclusive ones, given Genestealer Cult are a slightly lesser played faction than most. Otherwise, we're just starting to see the rollout of their Warhammer Plus miniature. This one's a little diorama with an Eldari Spirits here, rescuing the Spirit Stone from a Shattered Wraithlord. Quite a cool little Eldari diorama piece, and I must admit they're painted up pretty nicely there. The price of this one is basically 1 year's Warhammer Plus subscription. You can get it immediately if you get the yearly plan subscription, otherwise if you go for the monthly one you'd only be able to order it 12 months in. I guess we'll see their next batch of store anniversary ones and event exclusive ones next year. There might be some reveals for January. For the short term of Warhammer 40k releases, we've got the release wave that's going up for pre-order this weekend. So these ones are going live on Saturday the 11th of October, so up for sale in stores on the 25th. As with a lot of their reveals recently, this one's been a fairly Space Marine focused one. There's the Captain with a jump pack, the White Scars Combat Patrol Iron Hands, Karnok Var, plus some dice for the White Scars and Iron Hands, and Combat Patrol Harlequins. As ever, if you are looking to pick up any of those, the channel's affiliate discount retailers can get them a bit cheaper versus Games Workshop. They usually 10 to 20% off depending on where they are around the world. A big thank you to anyone ordering in Warhammer stuff through those when you do. It does help to support Allspecs Tactics. Going through the releases though, and first up we have Karnok Var. He's the Iron Captain of Clan Averni, well known to take the bionics thing to extremes even by Iron Hand standards. He's a miniature and Terminator armor with a bunch of scanners and command gizmos. There's a fun servo skull projecting a Fortress of Redemption, and he's armed with a great big club thing called a Power Tetsubo. I believe his pricing is $47 or £30. Then we've got the Jump Captain, who at least by my poll seems to be the single most popular release of the weekend. Quite a fun and fairly dynamic miniature with Thunderhammer and Storm Shield, the iconic sort of Smash Captain loadout. He's going to be $43.50 or £27, and it's got the option for a helmeted head swap and the option to be armed with a chainsaw instead of the Thunderhammer, though the Thunderhammer does feel like the fun one to me. It means there will likely be a digital update for the Jump Captain, given that he can't be armed with a chainsaw at the moment, so I guess we might find that turn up online sooner or later. Then we've got the Combat Patrol boxes, Combat Patrol White Scars maybe being one of the most interesting as it actually has a new miniature in it in Subodin Khan. There's him here alongside 3 Outriders, 5 Assault Intercessors and an Impulsor. The new Combat Patrols also have a transfer sheet for their given chapter as well, so there'll be a new one dedicated for the White Scars in this one. People were perhaps not over-enthused by this one, ranking a bit mid to low in terms of how much value they thought it had. It doesn't seem to be super popular with people wanting to pick it up either. It's certainly not going to be a huge amount of points on the tabletop. Subodin's Khan model I think is quite a fun one though. Captain of the White Scars First Company riding a jet bike. Some grav plates kind of similar to Primaris hover tanks. The jet bike's armed with an Onslaught Gatling cannon and he's got a power lance. Quite nice to get a White Scars bike captain. He'll be available in the Combat Patrol box set first and then eventually sold separately. Quite a high price tag most likely though. Games Workshop does tend to charge a premium for their mounted characters, maybe similar to Astra Militarum Lord Marshal Dreyer. Next up we have the Harlequins Combat Patrol, which again should be $170, £105 or €135. In this one there's the Solitaire, 6 Harlequins, 2 Skyweaver jet bikes and 2 Starweavers that can be built as Void Weavers. Nice to see a fairly dedicated box set to the Harlequins that has the majority of their small range in there. I guess that like the previous White Scars box set, there's a good chance that it's likely available while stocks last though. Games Workshop only told us that for the previous chapter-specific Space Marine box sets after a few weeks of them having been on sale. People were broadly a bit more positive about this one, ranking it a bit better for value, and a fair few people looked like they would be interested in picking one up. It does feel like really quite a focused expansion to an Eldari army if you want to add an allied Harlequin element. Then we've got Combat Patrol Iron Hands, perhaps the weirdest feeling Combat Patrol box of the chapter releases. This one's got 2 5 strike turrets, 10 heavy intercessors, and a tech marine to lead them. Technically still a reasonable enough discount on the miniatures, though feels kind of light on the plastic, particularly due to the heavy intercessors feeling very expensive for what they are. As a result, you guys really weren't too enthused about this one, ranking it pretty low in terms of popularity. It looks like it's going to be one of the least popular out of the Space Marine box sets, though still useful to a good number of people still. It just depends on whether or not you wanted to expand your army with these units specifically. Then finally for that release, there'll be a set of Iron Hands dice and White Scars dice, 16 of them from the usual prices from Games Workshop. Alongside these, we can expect a fair few digital rules updates. There should be rules for Karnakvar and an Iron Hands detachment, and Sabodan Khan and a White Scars detachment. We've basically got boosted versions of a bunch of the Codex specific ones coming out alongside, such as the fairly popular Raven Guard Shadowmark Talon. I may be slightly bravely recording this one a few days in advance, so there's a chance they might even be out by the time that you see this. Other things that are outstanding are rules for the Geomancer kill team for the Necrons, the Deathwatch Veterans update for their new models, and the Drukhari official digital points. I feel like there's at least a reasonable chance that we get that all at once, whether it was earlier this week or next one. For other near-term releases though, we also had another couple of Space Marine ones. We had the reveal of the Black Library Master of Rites Ferren Areios. He's the captain of the 6th Company of the Ultramarines and has starred in some novels. It seems like he's going to be coming out alongside his new Black Library novel, whenever that happens to arrive later this year. He's a fun captain miniature with a Thunderhammer, Servo Skull Scribe, and a great big badge showing that he is the captain of the 6th, I guess. I'm going to guess he's just going to be one of those commemorative miniatures that is around for a bit and then sells out, kind of similar to Celestian Sacrosanct Avalyn or Off-Tack Blackhawk, the Orc Warboss. I'd be kind of surprised if they give the Ultramarines yet another named captain model in their permanent roster, but on the other hand, they let Uriel Ventress stick around. Otherwise, for Space Marine releases happening soon, there's the Warhammer Heroes miniatures for Strike Force Variel of the Dark Angels. These are Games Workshop's gacha game sort of blind box offerings, the idea being that you buy a box set that isn't hugely expensive but you don't know which of the Space Marine miniatures that you're getting. Probably more useful for fun factor than actually getting the set too much, as they decided to make them extra unpleasant and not guarantee getting the full set of them even if you buy the full 8 model display unit. I feel like for unique sculpt Primaris Space Marines they didn't really make them the most interesting in the world. There's a Reaver, an Infernus Marine, an Intercessor, Incursor and Assault Intercessor, plus a Sternguard Veteran, and it looks like the last one is probably a Phobos or Reaver Lieutenant. It appears that he's armed with a combat blade. I have seen some reports of people being able to buy these. From a quick search it looks like some of them are available in eBay in the UK. I believe they're usually distributed through sort of department store offerings, things like Target or other places. So way harder to get your hands on than some of them if you want the sculpts, though I must admit I don't really find them particularly special compared with most. Before we move on to the other upcoming releases, I'll just give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor in Futureproof Modular Terrain, makers of some sculpted plastic battlefield terrain, with perhaps the main selling points being that you can take it down and reassemble it in a completely different configuration and have the option to have it come pre-painted in a good number of different colours, which the vast majority of sculpted sets don't do. The basic idea is they're made of a whole bunch of modular components that you can take apart and reassemble at will. They initially launched through a pretty huge Kickstarter last year, and now their things are going on to more general sale. They sent me a few pieces to take a look at. Here are a few of my miniatures hanging out in their terrain. I must admit I was quite impressed with the colours detailing and how fast it was to get quite a fun terrain set on the board. The ruins do take a little time to go together, but far less time than say assembling a bunch of MDF and hobbying it up to make it look nice would do. I quite like the end effect. They're pretty useful functional pieces as well for Warhammer 40K and its line of sight rules. Nice to find ruin pieces with clear footprints. In any case, feel free to check out their stuff. There'll be links down in the video description below. If you wanted one of the pre-painted sets, they've got a fair few different designs to choose from. I'll leave a few of them on screen now. But in any case, a big thank you to them for sponsoring the video. I'll cycle back to them at the end of the video to talk through a few pros, cons and specific sets that they have. Getting back to the Warhammer 40K release calendar though, we've got quite a few things that seem to be stand out at some point before Christmas, though perhaps could be a little bit unclear as to exactly what order they come in. For the releases that Games Workshop's been showing off over the past few weeks, there's been lots of Space Marine stuff, the big headline act perhaps being the Space Marine Crux Terminatus Box Set, this one basically feeling like it's the fill-in slot for Shadow Spear or Strike Force Agastus but for 10th edition, a late game Space Marine box set with some big new kits in it, and this one has 2 sets of 5 Terminator Assault Squads, 1 set of 5 regular Terminators, a Terminator Ancient, Captain and Chaplain. The Assault Terminators were units that basically everyone was expecting sooner or later. We'd had the regular Terminator squads at the start of 10th edition, and it was maybe surprising they didn't redo them at the same time, but it looks like they were saving them for late 10th. They're pretty much similar in style to the previous ones, but with the chunky upscale Terminator armour, the small square shields with thunder hammers that have been the favoured loadout up till recently in 10th edition. Though they do have the Lightning Claw option as well, if you want to make them specialise in blending a whole bunch of 1-wound infantry. There's also the new sculpt for the Terminator Ancient model as well. From Games Workshop's reveal, it might just be this one pose for him with the banner and Stormbolter. It seems that he does have a few head swap options, and as per normal with these launch Battleforce box sets, both the Terminator Ancient and the Assault Terminator squad will likely be coming out here first, and then get a solo release a fair bit down the line. If Games Workshop keep this Battleforce pricing the same as, say, the Real Space Raiders one for Drukhari recently, that's to put this one at £150 or $240 post-price rises. Going for the standard prices for the Terminators and their characters, it seems that it would be around about a 30% saving, and the box set does look like it's going to be a rather popular one. People like the new Terminators and have been looking forward to Assault ones. I guess it'd probably have its own release weekend, maybe paired with all the Ultramarines things that we know are coming, as opposed to releasing at the same time as the Christmas Battleforces. It was revealed before the Christmas Battleforce box set, so maybe there'll be a release for this thing sometime within late October to November time. Otherwise, in case you want some more Space Marines with your Space Marines, it seems that the other chapter-specific Combat Patrol and character releases were preludes to the Ultramarines getting a massive amount more stuff. Rather than just getting the one unique character sculpt, they got both Marnius Calgar with a new sculpt in Terminator armor, Primarch Returning, a new rendition of their Victrix Honor Guard. They've got a Combat Patrol box coming, including Chief Librarian Tigurius, an Ultramarine upgrade sprue, and there's also some Space Marine heads that are coming that are more generic ones as opposed to specifically Ultramarines, though it seems that they'll be coming first in the Christmas Battleforce box set, so as a result they might not be along till later potentially. As with the rest, we shall be getting an Ultramarines dice set to go alongside those. They did those for the other chapters, and given the Ultramarines do have at least a fairly solid roster of units now, I wonder whether or not they might even do a codex supplement for them. Still seems maybe a bit unlikely, but they could surprise us. Otherwise I guess they'll have at least a fairly hefty digital update to update those 3 datasheets, plus doing an Ultramarine specific detachment. Looking through their new miniatures though, we finally have Primarch Returning. He is now the leader of the Ultramarines Victrix Honor Guard, a rather nice new rendition of this all very overachieving Ultramarines captain. His helmet that he's carrying now in the style of the Victrix Honor Guard, though a lot of the rest of the trappings of the miniature are at least kind of similar. He's likely to be around £30, €36 or $48 as per the named character price tag. Then we've got the Ultramarines Victrix Honor Guard. These are a remake of the older metal than resin Honor Guard kit. They're armed with relic power weapon axes of Ultramar with some ore from the planet that the Tyranids first devoured, and they pair those with mastercrafted bolt carbines. They seem very likely to be quite dangerous in a scrap, maybe akin to the Inner Circle Companions, Wolfguard Head Takers or Sanguinary Guard in their respective chapters. It seems that these ones are coming as a 3-model box set. This is their base loadout, the more standard Honor Guard one with some capes, axes and the bolt guns. But on top of that, they also have the option to build their alternative sculpts and act as the Honor Guard command squad. I'm not sure how that's going to be represented datasheet wise. Maybe they'll have 2 different datasheets to represent the base squad and the upgraded one. But the Ancient in the box has a kind of ridiculously enormous and impressive banner, the chapter banner of the Ultramarines, the banner of Mk5, making the regular rather enormous flags of the Space Marines look tame by comparison. On top of that, you also have the option to equip one as the chapter champion with paired swords. I'm sure he's going to be rather dangerous in a fight, and will be interesting to see what sort of command abilities that the chapter banner brings. I'd hope it to be something at least fairly impressive by the sheer size of that. Seems likely that they might cost over and above the standard cost for the 3-model elite boxes, if they are going to have quite such a big and centerpiece alternative build option there though. Finally for the Ultramarines, and maybe the most weird and surprising release that they decided to do, was a new sculpt for Marnius Calgar. Despite it really not being all that long ago that they released his model in Gravis armor with the Honor Guard, that model's fully off sale and removed from the Games Workshop web store now. You could very easily just continue using the current Calgar model and just use the updated datasheets or the Legends rules when they get there. But in any case, we will be getting Terminator armored Marnius Calgar. He's returned to being in the armor of Antilochus, So Games Workshop going for more of a throwback to past versions of the model than the slightly more modernised Gravis Primaris one that they had for him. He's standing on a great big column, and weirdly enough he has a sword that he won't really be able to draw very well in those power fists. Here's a few more pictures of the model. He seems suitable enough for the chapter master of the Ultramarines, but at the same time certainly feels like a peculiar choice to resculpt. He might be a bit more costly than an average named character I'd guess, potentially similar to High Marshal Helbrecht. Then the Ultramarines have got a revamped upgrade sprue to be a bit more in line with these sort of divergent chapter ones like the Blood Angels or the Dark Angels got. They've got really quite a massive amount of shoulder pads, lots of different ones for different armour variants between Primaris and Terminator plates, a bunch of themed heads, a nice crested helmet, some vehicle upgrades and a couple of short swords, likely priced around about £21 or $35 or so. I guess nice enough if you want some chapter iconography. That feels a bit less interesting than some of the upgrades that the Black Templars or Blood Angels got. That one's also going to be coming out with an Ultramarine specific transfer sheet. And it seems that the first place that you might be able to get it would be Combat Patrol Ultramarines. Again, this one should be $170, £105 or €135. In this one you get Chief Librarian Tigurius, 5 Reavers and 5 Intercessors, 3 Aggressors and 3 Blade Guard Veterans, and then those Ultramarine upgrades and transfers. As it goes, it feels like it could be a useful enough building block in a player's army. Not exactly standout discount or standout plastic in the box set, given there's 2 copies of a 3 model elite kit here. They often don't really tend to get you all that much plastic for how much you spent. It does seem useful for the Ultramarines, and particularly if you want the upgrade sprue though, it's got quite a good discount if you would have bought that at full value otherwise. If you ignore it though, it's a bit more run of the mill. Feels like it could be at least useful to other chapters as well, if you use Tigurius as a generic librarian and maybe change some of the heraldry. Then finally, for the main Space Marines and Ultramarines releases, there's also that Space Marine head sprue that they unveiled. A whole bunch of different bear and helmeted heads that you could use to customize some Space Marines. Feels like it'd be kind of niche in appeal. I feel like the majority of people tend to prefer helmets over bear heads. They could be nice enough for some character to sergeants and characters perhaps. Again, if they're the same sort of upgrade sprue price, then it might be $35 or £21. They're first going to be coming out in the Space Marine Christmas Battleforce box set, and then likely a solo release after. It could mean that they're a fair way behind these other Ultramarine releases we've just seen. Besides Space Marines, there's maybe a few other things that we might expect before we get to Christmas Battleforce box sets. The Combat Patrol magazine will be continuing to roll out around the world. We're up to around about issue 58 out of 90 in the UK right now, so getting to the end of the Leagues of Votan ones. I believe the USA is trailing somewhere around 30 issues behind. So coming to the end of the Eldari ones and going into the Chaos Space Marines, the UK one's going to be getting into the Genestealer Cult issues over the next few weeks. Not everywhere around the world can buy individual issues separately. I believe the USA doesn't generally sell issues individually at the moment. For the UK though, there's a few current deals that are a little cheaper than usual. You can either order or pre-order in individual issues through Forbidden Planet. The good ones tend to go fast, though currently they have Aberrants for £13.50 including delivery. That's less than half price compared with elsewhere. Also, the Genestealer Cult Major seems to be a better deal than most at the moment. I'll leave links to them down in the video description. Those ones are affiliate links and help to support the channel if you do pick up anything. Beyond that, they have a few other kits that are not quite so standout deals due to being split over multiple issues. They've got Neophyte Hybrids, Catholian Berserks, Hearthkin Warriors and Hermkin Pioneers. These will still be some of the very cheapest places to get those kits in the UK at the moment though. For the ones coming up after the Genestealer Cult for the UK, it'll then be a bunch of Guard issues, Cadian Command Squads, Cadian Shock Troops, Field Ordnance Batteries, Heavy Weapon Squads, and the Sentinel. Most of the ones that come in just one single issue being really quite standout good deals. Turning up prior to Christmas Battleforce previews, I guess we're probably going to get our next preview show online from Games Workshop. They tend to keep these coming semi-regularly, though seem to have eased off the accelerator a little bit on them recently. The last one that they did was their big summer preview one, and at this point I'd probably guess that they'd just do the one more preview show before the end of the year. I guess they could surprise us with something in December though. Rather than doing these big live events, they've been dropping quite a lot of Warhammer 40k content on either Monday or Friday reveals, and for whatever reason seem to have decided to decouple their previews online from live events like the LVO or Nova. I say it's probably most likely that they do their reveals on Warhammer Day. That's on the 25th of October this year. They've not officially announced that yet, I believe, but given it's a celebration of their own making and timing and not coupled with an in-person event, it seems more likely. Otherwise, if not then maybe at the World Champions or Grand Narrative event around the 6th to the 9th of November. Around then or before then, we'll probably hear about their many festive offerings for the year. They generally do some little collectible version of the Red Gobbo every year for people who enjoyed them. And last year we also got a pair of Ratlings cooking up some tasty treats as well, doubling down on the seasonal miniatures. That big event in early November is probably going to be of some interest in itself. The World Champions of Warhammer is usually interesting to watch, with some of the best players duking it out, and also the Grand Narrative. They aim to have it shape the lore of one tiny corner of the 40k galaxy, and they've gone for a somewhat well-known setting in this one, with the planet of Mordian, home to the Mordian Iron Guard, apparently assailed by the forces of Chaos and Necrons. The outcome of that one could potentially have some consequences for an actual planet that you might have heard of in the 40k galaxy. Then, likely in mid-November, we'll have the Christmas Battleforce box sets. Last year they went on pre-order around the 16th of November, so for release around the 30th. And as we saw earlier in the week, they've got 7 ones for Warhammer 40k, Space Marines Guard, Tau Empire, Emperor's Children, Chaos Space Marines, Leagues of Votann, and Tyranids. Again, I'd maybe estimate the price of these being around about $240 or £150. It's not impossible that they could be a little pricier than this though, as the discounts do seem just a little bit better than their normal Combat Patrol offerings. I'll hopefully be aiming to talk through them once again in a video this weekend, and pair that with talking about the ones that you guys found most and least popular, so I'll just go over them very briefly here. The Space Marine one is an Iron Halo Strike Force. This one's got Company Heroes, a Primaris Lieutenant, Sternguard Veterans, and Hellblasters, though just a 5-man squad, plus 2 big chunky Dreadnoughts, a Redemptor and a Ballistas. They'll also apparently have a copy of that Space Marine Heads kit as well, so a few more customizing options there. Overall it does feel like really quite a big box and should have quite broad appeal. Next up, we've got the Tyranid Crusher Stampede. This one's a 5-monster box set with a Neurotyrant, Screamer Killer, Haruspex, Turvagon, and Maliceptor, the last of which all have dual builds. I've seen people have some mixed feelings about this one. Only 5 models is never really going to feel too great in a Battleforce box set like this, but they're generally quite fun and useful ones for Tyranid players, quite a lot of them being rather powerful in game. Next, the Emperor's Children have a Demon Primarch here with Fulgrim in a Blissbound warband. He's joined by 2 sets of Flawless Blades and a set of Noise Marines. Nice for people to get an option to get Fulgrim at discount. Maybe a bit of unfortunate overlap with a load of Flawless Blades that you could also get in the Combat Patrol though. If you already have Fulgrim, that's going to mean it's not going to be so useful for current Emperor's Children players though. The Leagues of Votann have a Chthonian Prospect. They've got 10 Chthonian Berserks and some Chthonian Earthshaker Mole Artillery, a Capricus Carrier or Defender, some Brockhere Thunderkin, and a Brockhere Ironmaster Engineer and his retinue. It's nice to see a couple of the new kits here that a lot of people won't have at this point. Seems like it could be a useful enough chunk of a Leagues of Votann army. Pretty much all of the units are at least usable in game, though to me it feels maybe a bit more like a supporting force as opposed to the main staples of the army for better or worse. Next up, we've got the Tau Empire Farsight Cadre. This one's just the 6 battlesuits plus supporting drones, only one of them being a particularly big battlesuit and the broadside sort of medium size. Admittedly, they're all pretty useful, fairly nice and in-demand models, but also feels like a box set that really underlines just how expensive Tau are to collect. You really don't get a lot of points in this one. It's pretty similar for the Astra Militarum Death Corps of Krieg. Not a lot of points in this one whatsoever, but it does have good numbers of a lot of the new Krieg range, 2 of the artillery teams, a command squad, 20 infantry, and a combat engineer unit. Kind of interesting that this one's coming out in such close proximity to the Krieg Combat Patrol, which has some overlap. Again though, it looks like this one might be tempting a fair few people. The plastic Death Corps range was particularly nice and well done. Then finally we've got the Chaos Space Marines Hellforged Warband, perhaps with a slight slant towards the Demon Engines with a Lord Discordant and the Warpforged set of the Obliterators and Venom Crawler. Then some fire support for Havocs, some Chaos Legionaries and a Rhino. This one feels like quite a nicely well balanced Chaos Space Marine Warband here. A good few staples and then some fun units that people enjoy, plus having quite a lot of points in the box set. It feels like a fairly solid offering. In any case, that one's going to be really quite a big launch weekend. Going by what's happened in the past though, a lot of the in-demand ones tend to go really quite quickly. I certainly wouldn't be too surprised if there's a fair bit of pressure on that Space Marine one. Next up, for a fairly recent reveal that Games Workshop gave us, we've got Wolf Scouts versus Stealth Suits in Kill Team Dead Silence. This one's the middle one of the 3 set around the Tomb World sequence, and at least from the appearance of the front of the box it appears that there's 5 Wolf Scouts against 5 Stealth Suits. They really weren't all that clear on Warhammer Community as to how many there'd be in the box sets from their article, and they did show off more builds than this, as there's a lot of dual build options for each one of the squads, but I feel like if you could make more models than this in the box set, they probably would have shown it off on the front cover. I'd guess this one will probably release at some point before Christmas. If I had to speculate, maybe sometime around late November, early December time, though that's a guess. If they're showing things that don't come out till 2026, they usually put some sort of rider on it like in the new year. If there's no terrain and only 5 models per side, maybe there's at least a small chance that this could be a cheaper box set than some of the ones that we've seen recently. For the Wolf Scouts, that's going to give the Space Wolves another unique unit. They're clad in Phobos armour rather than the Scout Carapace armour. I guess making a fair bit of sense given that the actual veteran Space Marines do have genuinely stealthy power armour now, or at least that's what the Phobos armor is supposed to be. It seems that in this one you get 5 models in the box with dual build options, and then also a hunting wolf to go alongside. For the assembly options, there's one for a junior wolf priest sculpt, one's got a regular plasma gun, not a plasma incinerator, one can take a plasma pistol, there's what looks like an instigator bolt carbine there, I don't know if it might give the same move shoot move rules as in other places. The pack leader can take a power sword, and one seems to have a haywire mine. If that's like the incursors, then it could deal some mortal wounds when enemies get too close. Could be an interesting little unit, will be fun to see their datasheet rules. I guess they'll probably have the infiltrate rule and perhaps scout as well, and possibly quite a complicated datasheet if you have to do either or for 5 different space marines with interesting kit. Otherwise, we've got the new kill team of Tau stealth suits. These ones have updated the XV25 armor that was a bit more chunky and egg-like. This one feels like it's sort of halfway between that and the previous XV15, with some elements of the ghost kill thrown in as well. I personally quite enjoyed them at first appearance. It seems that they do have a few specialists as their kill team. One deploying teleport homers, one with some demo charges or maybe EMP grenades perhaps. One of them has jamming gear and 2 of them get fusion blasters. And they come with 2 drones plus the option to build one of those homing beacons on its own. The drones pictured were a gun drone and marker drone. While again Games Workshop weren't super clear, it does appear that they're probably going to be a squad of 5 plus drone support, and that would mean a new datasheet for the stealth suits. That could be quite a big change if so for the Tau, given how pivotal they've been recently. It is kind of weird to balance a whole load of Tau shooting around a really powerful buff that only they can hand out. Those 2 will both come out in Kill Team Dead Silence, which Games Workshop absolutely won't make enough of. It'll sell out really quickly, and there'll be lots of people waiting a long time for the individual release. The usual pattern with Kill Team, it seems, is that you get the individual release of the kits when the next big box turns up, so the Wolf Scouts and Stealth Suits probably won't be out for a seriously long time at this point on their own, but when Dead Silence turns up, it means that we'll get the Death Watch Kill Team and the Necron Geomancer kill team on their own, and they came out in Kill Team Tomb World. The Deathwatch Veterans are another one of those 5 models build either or style kits. Some quite cool gear that I'm glad survived into Primaris form. That likely means that the Deathwatch Veteran datasheet will lose a lot of options. The Geomancer is the specialist stoneworking and stasis cryptech, alongside a small canoptic retinue, some big plasma sights, and some tomb crawlers bearing a little bit of heavier firepower. And then I guess this will also be the time when they release the Kill Team Tomb World terrain set separately. This one was quite a fun take on their sort of boarding action style terrain, with a whole bunch of half-repaired Necrons in the walls. That could be useful to some Kill Team collectors if they wanted to play games on the new terrain set and weren't able to pick it up from the Tomb World box set. As we've been going on with the Kill Team releases, they've been gradually reboxing the ones that initially came out. I believe their general idea is that they stay mainly functional for 3 years under the Kill Team rule set, and then they have them being less vocal in the game, and their box sets are mainly aimed for 40k after that. One such kit that's been taken away and is out for reboxing are the Kill Team Legionaries right now. It looks like Games Workshop have both taken the Kill Team Legionaries and the regular Legionaries down off the Games Workshop web store currently. I guess that might probably mean that they'll come back with the upgrade sprue included, though it remains to be seen at this point. I think it will be a shame to lose that one. It adds in a few fun parts such as the Reaper Chain Cannon, the Balefire Tome, and the Heavy Chain Axe. Talking of some solo releases and reboxing, I mentioned the majority of things that are going to be coming out in Battleforce box sets. They'll all come out as individual releases later. One from slightly earlier though was the Drukhari Archon that came out in the Real Space Raiders Battleforce box set recently. This one's going to need a solo release of their own, likely $43, £27 or €34 or so. This one was quite a popular update to the previous Archon model with its unusual pose, having a few options including a soul trap versus pistol and a choice of melee weapons. It seems like they're still going to be a pretty pivotal character post-codex for the Drukhari as they were pre-codex. Around December time it seems likely that we get the next balance update to Warhammer 40k. We've had one fairly recently at this point, though they usually do one every 3 months or so. Given the one that we just had was in mid-September, it seems likely to be sometime in December or maybe early January. Last year they flipped them to December from January, so I'd guess they'll continue that way, though it's not impossible they choose to flip back. I just don't think it'll happen over the sort of Christmas period where everyone's away. This one will have all the standard balance pass style things, updated points for the game, FAQs and errata, and the balance data slate itself making any rules changes that they want to. In particular this time we might be in for a fair few new detachments for a few armies compared with before. They were planning to release them with every balance update for the rest of 10th edition, but they didn't wind up doing so in September, saying they ran out of time, and said there'd be more coming in the next update as a result. As it goes, it feels like Warhammer 40k game balance has been in far worse spots before. Based on early tournament performance, it might not be too unexpected if either Admech or Eldari took a few hits. Maybe some others like the Sisters of Battle and Deathwatch might be in a worrying sort of place too. Though given that this one probably marks around about 6 months before 11th edition, it remains to be seen if they do something more major. At the end of 10th edition, we had quite a big update with Arcs of Omen really quite significantly changing the way that the game was played. And last year we also had the Grotmas calendar as well, handing out a whole bunch of new detachments to Warhammer 40k factions. Both of those were fairly well received. It seems at least possible that they go for something a bit more high effort than normal for what's probably the last major balance pass of 10th edition. I'd guess the one that follows on 3 months after that might not be quite such a big affair. Then for over the new year, we usually get some sort of model reveal on Christmas Day itself from Games Workshop. Last year we had Fulgrim, and before that it was some Dark Angels, Inner Circle Companions, and Asmodai, I want to say. Usually they tend to save something fairly major for that. I kind of wonder whether or not they were planning to unveil the Nightbringer at that point, though obviously he got leaked early. Sometimes around New Year or early January they do some hype teasers with a few model silhouettes. They did that for a few years running, though didn't do it last year. It might be another way to get a few teasers. They're usually at least fairly identifiable for what we might be able to find. We already do have a few identifiable teasers though from rumour engines. One of the biggest questions at the moment is around Games Workshop's upcoming end edition campaign that they usually do, but due to leaks and teasers we do know a few more things that are coming out in 2026. As just mentioned, we have the new rendition of the Catan Shard of the Nightbringer, redone Void Dragon style and really quite a lot bigger and more impressive than he was previously. Already his great side aloft, a few scarabs swarming around him, held up by some Eldritch Necron lightning and his cape disintegrating into pixels. He leaks via a Kill Team dossier, and Games Workshop confirmed that he'd be coming out in 2026. Broadly speaking, his miniature was really quite a well received one. He does seem quite fun and all very intimidating. Apparently he is going to be getting an updated Warhammer 40k datasheet when he comes out. I'm not entirely sure why he desperately needed one. His current stats are very scary, even if he is slow moving to compensate. His price is quite likely to be around about the £80 or $130 mark, similar to the Void Dragon. Due to that same leak, we also know the next two kill teams coming out in 2026 as well, and these ones are going to be the Sisters of Battle and the Raptors. For the Sisters, we've got Celestian Insidiants. It looks like they're going to be a 10 model box set, kind of similar to the Sisters Novitiates. They're supposed to be a dedicated psycho hunting unit armed with null maces, I think, for the most part, and then having quite a few fun fancy options, plenty of Condemner bolt pistols, some hand flamers, and a fun sword and shield. With their Insidiant name, it sort of makes you think they might be another scouty infiltrator style unit similar to the Novitiates. I'm maybe not super hopeful they're going to be a vastly strong unit if their main thing is going to be being good against psychers, which not every single army has. It's still very possible that Games Workshop could make them interesting though, and they certainly look like an interesting kit for kit bashing some characters from. In that box set, they'll be facing off against the new Raptors and Warp Talons kits. It at least looks like there probably will be enough to make an entire squad of Warp Talons from this one, as best we can tell from some of the pictures. There are at least 2 in the box set, and like several of the other Kill Team releases that we've had recently, it looks like they're a primary set of 5 that build 2 multi-build options from each model, and here's a selection of the ones that we've seen so far. Plenty of interesting and threatening power weapons here. There's a power sword on the Sergeant, one with a power spear and one with a heavy chain axe. There's a melter gun guy that I believe can also be equipped with a plasma gun or flamer, and a rather sinister looking one with a whole bunch of mutations. Here was their sort of unit product picture for them, called the Murder Wing, and they're pictured alongside a Chaos Lord to lead them. I'm not sure whether that's good news or bad news, to be honest. If he is included and the kill team really isn't inflated in price all that much, it could be a cheaper way to get a character. But if they are significantly more expensive than they would be to buy separately otherwise, then it could be a bit of a tax on getting the new style Raptors and Warp Talons on the board. Otherwise, in 2026 though, probably the main thing that Games Workshop's going to be doing for the first few months of that is their end of edition campaign series. They've done this a few different ways so far, but the common theme has usually been some sort of lore story. We had the fall of Cadia and the return of Guilliman, then the Psychic Awakening, and then the Arcs of Omen narrative sequence, often featuring some big names for Warhammer 40k that's pretty fun. And then they pair them with some model releases for some named characters, and also some kind of rules offering. What rules they decide to put in the books this time around is very much an unanswered question. In 8th edition they did more sort of supplement expansions to codexes that did add some fun stuff, but also didn't really feel like great value purchases if they were asking you to buy a book just for a few pages worth of rules. And then in 9th edition, instead of doing that, they went for the Boarding Actions expansion, introducing a new shipboard terrain fighting style for Warhammer 40k. If I had to guess, it might be a sort of expansion that doesn't necessarily make itself necessary for more mainstream Warhammer 40k. Games Workshop have generally been trying to keep it so the only book that you need is the codex itself, which I think is good, even if it does mean some heavy use of digital downloads. Hopefully could be some interesting content rules-wise though, and might likely have some interesting lore plot progression to go alongside. For the characters that generally tend to release in this era, they're usually quite major plot characters. Again, this has been fairly consistent over the last 3 editions. We had all those Triumvirate characters at the end of 7th edition, and then Farside, Azrael, Dante, and the Lion in 9th. It seems they've got some really likely candidates that would fit pretty perfectly for this. And Games Workshop might have given us some hints about this, with all the characters that still have a resin finecast model on sale rather than going away with the rest, or still happen to have rules in their codex despite having no miniature. I'd guess it's a bit less likely for the ones that actually got outright removed within 10th edition. Seems a bit more likely that if they're coming back it might be 11th edition or later, but who knows with Games Workshop. If I had to guess for these, probably the ones that I'd say are the very most likely candidates might be Huron Blackheart and Trazyn the Infinite, both of which are really quite big, interesting and well developed characters within Warhammer 40k. Huron got to stay in the Chaos Space Marine Codex despite having no model, and Trazyn was the only Necron named character that survived with a finecast model, and it just doesn't really seem likely they decided to redo Oricon without redoing Trazyn as well. Potentially some of the other finecast models could be a clue though, and we might get some new characters. Perhaps out of the rest of them, Pedro Cantor could be an option, as literally all the other named finecast characters in Codex Space Marines have got updates now. As Games Workshop rolled out the End Edition campaign last time around, they gave us some Boarding Patrol box sets. They seemed like quite a good fit to add some excitement and I guess some bonus sales to the quieter period in the build up to 10th. We might see something similar. I do kind of wonder if the front end of this might be things like the Death Corps of Krieg and the Harlequin Combat Patrol box sets. If they wanted to, they could probably dream up some other similar style ones for a bunch of other factions as well. For End Edition campaigns though, there's the chance of really big names coming back. There's a whole ton of Primarchs, both Loyalist and Traitor, that Games Workshop could bring back if they want to. It certainly feels like Leman Russ has the biggest odds. He's the only one who's had his entire army range rather well developed, and particularly so with their big refresh in 10th edition. And probably doesn't hurt either that he's not exactly lore dead as well, just merely mysteriously missing for a long time. So there wouldn't exactly be a big outcry if he suddenly turned up from somewhere. If they keep going long enough, I'm sure they'll get around to resurrecting all the possible ones in due course. Maybe Vulcan being another super obvious one, given he's a perpetual, and Lorgar and Perturabo both exist and are active in the lore right now. If they decided to do Leman Russ in the same style as Lionel Johnson for 9th edition 40k, there's a chance they might well unveil him at the same time as the new edition. Otherwise, potentially End Edition campaign things aside, we've had a few more teasers that looks like they could be some Xenos stuff from the rumour engines. There have been 2 over the last few weeks that look like they could be potentially Kroot technology. The one on the left having a good similarity to a couple of Kroot weapons, and the one on the right looks like it's a sort of Tau Tech bionic Krootox hand perhaps. If you put them together then maybe it might add up to some sort of special shaper riding on the back of a Krootox. I guess they have one cavalry character in the Lone Spear, but don't actually have a more mounted commander style model. Another small teaser that looks potentially identifiable is this sort of sash thing that looks like it's painted in the same sort of style as the Corsairs. I believe that Chapter Master Valrak have been saying there might be some Corsair releases coming for some time, maybe done in a similar style to a few of the Kill Team kits where they've had the first Kill Team kit as the sort of outriders to lay the way, and then they follow up with a more developed range in a similar sort of way to what they did with the Death Corps of Krieg or the Kroot. Could be some potentially fun news for the Eldari there. I guess if they did come out with them, they'd probably be playable both by the Drukhari and the Craft Worlds. According to the person who pointed this one out to me on Discord, they might also have some jump infantry too, as some of those might have been present in a recent Corsair book. There's a few more rumour engines that might or might not be Warhammer 40k related. There's what looks like there's a Pale Spear, which might imply Alpha Legion. That could be for Warhammer 40k, though it could be for Alpha Legion though. And there's some interesting chains and balls and skulls and things that look like they could be something Cornate. They do look fairly similar to some of the ones on the Khorne Berserkers, but could be very easily something Age of Sigmar related too. Talking of the Horus Heresy, they look like there's going to be a few interesting kits that could certainly be of some use to Warhammer 40k collectors, and perhaps the biggest and most important one of those could be the releases of the new Adeptus Custodes. Games Workshop gave us a not so subtle hint that they had a Guardian Spear in plastic, which probably heralds the start of the conversion of the Forge World resin range into plastic kits. The Custodes also had their rulebook for the Horus Heresy new edition delayed as well, which implies that it's going to be coming out when their new range does, likely launching with a big box and a bunch of their Forge World options made into plastic, which could reduce the cost on them pretty greatly for 40k collectors. The big question is whether or not they continue to support them for mainstream 40k, or decides to send them to Legends at a later date, as they did with some of the Space Marine Heresy kits, where they would still be playable, but with far worse rule support than they have currently. Otherwise for the Heresy, I'm sure they'll continue in the slow gradual rollout of new things for the Space Marines, plus next waves for the Solar Auxilia, Mechanicum and Knights. For other releases that might be of interest to some 40k collectors, they're probably going to have some Mk5 Marines coming at some point in this recent edition. That's the Heresy armour with all the bonding studs. They had some new artwork depicting it. They did a similar thing with a mid-edition armour release last time around for the Mark III plate, likely coming in a fairly big launch box mid-edition. It could be of some use to Space Marine collectors, particularly Chaos Space Marine ones that often dig into the Heresy armour types. Then as well as that, it also looks like there's some new Cataphracti Terminators coming. Again, they had some new art of them with some slightly different armor styling compared with the previous kit. This one's the big and super chunky version, and we also got a good hint for them as we basically had a picture of one with a Volkite weapon. There's a good chance that when they come out though, they might be a box set of 6 as opposed to the big 10 strong box set that they have currently. The data sheet for the Horus Heresy range giving some clues there maybe. I'm sure there might well be some more surprises before we get to the end of 10th edition, though with the culmination of Games Workshop's End Edition campaign that'll set the stage for the new edition of the game. They usually operate in 3-year release cycles, and have been really quite predictable about that over the last few editions, so the expectation is that they'll probably do 11th edition in sometime around June or July 2026. People have all manner of hopes and expectations for a new edition of the game. I'd guess they'll probably do a soft reset for this one, so more change the core rules and make some digital updates, but not actually just invalidate every single codex in the game once again. I feel like that wouldn't be great feels after they just did that for 10th. For the launch of the last 2 editions, we had it in some big reveal shows, May in 2020 and March in 2023. The first preview showed off a cool cinematic trailer, plus just a couple of new models to whet people's appetite. And then over the last month or so, they gradually revealed new things that would ultimately be in the big launch box. New editions of 40k have Space Marines versus an antagonist faction. We've had Death Guard, Necrons and Tyranids in that order, and it means that both the Space Marines and that army get a whole bunch of new plastic kits, so will be good news for them. Most speculation has been so far that it's going to be Orcs in 10th edition. They would check a lot of boxes and be quite a popular option, though I guess we'll see. For the launch box, I made a recent video speculating about it. They do have quite a lot of common features with monopose miniatures, entirely new sculpts, often featuring a good number of characters, and some entirely new units in the box set. And they often tend to be some of the very best deals that you can possibly get in Warhammer 40k, so lots of hype and anticipation for that one. With the start of 11th edition, I'd imagine that a lot of the remaining Firstborn kits are going to go away. We had a bit of a cull at the start of 10th edition, and now there's not really all that many Firstborn Space Marines left. Vanguard veterans seem almost guaranteed to get an update. We might get new versions of the Predator or Vindicator, or have them converted into Primaris hover tanks of some sort. There's plenty other obvious options for things that they could release, Venerable or Ironclad Dreadnought, maybe a new Landspeeder Storm, and it remains to be seen in just how they treat things like the Tactical Marines and Devastators, whether or not we get new versions of them, or if they're just going to be replaced by the Intercessors and Desolation Marines. The Orcs have plenty of possibilities as well. It seems they're sort of doing an Orc Primaris refresh as well to some extent, redoing some kits with bigger and chunkier proportions, and it means that quite a lot of the Orc things from 5th edition might well be being replaced. Things like Looters, Burners, Knobs, Storm Boys, Warbikers and things like that might be at the top of the list for refreshes. Knowing Orcs though, I'm sure we'll get a fair few more fun and unexpected things too. It will be fun to see whatever they come up with for a launch box set. The Space Marines and whichever antagonist they choose will both have the releases from the launch set itself, and then a wave of follow-up releases that come alongside their codex early in the edition. Though for the rest of the armies in 11th edition, it feels like there's plenty of release waves that just seem far higher odds than some. Dark Angels had their Deathwing all redone very nicely for 10th edition, but the Raven Wing were untouched. I'd be more surprised if not, if they don't do something with the Raven Wing for 11th edition. And then beyond that, the Grey Knights and Drukhari are both armies that just very clearly need a range refresh with a big update, neither of which got it in 10th. I feel like they've got to be some of the higher odds armies to get some focus and proper attention in 11th as a result. Otherwise, for a bit more speculation, maybe we'll get some Kaschan Jungle Fighters if they're going to be doing 3 guard release waves in a row. They've redone the Cadians and done a Deathcore release wave. And for the Blood Angels, I'd hope they might do a Death Company kit, as it just seems unlikely that Games Workshop decided to redo Blood Angels and basically not give them a kit outside of some super generic upgrade sprues. I'd also speculate if we might see a few more vehicles coming in 11th edition. 10th edition has been really quite infantry heavy, and not really all that much in the way of big tanks or monsters. Finally, there's also the possibility for new factions to crop up, and the one that feels like it's only a matter of time is whenever they choose to develop the Dark Mechanicum. It's been one of the top fan request armies for years, and they've checked off a massive amount of other fan request armies during that time, and it feels like we've got Vashtor as the outriser of whatever happens with them, or very creepy heretical technology indeed. In most editions of the game, they do come out with at least one new faction, if not multiple. In 8th we had Custodes, Chaos Knights, Death Guard and Revamped Sisters. In 9th we had Votan and World Eaters. In 10th we've had the Emperor's Children, and a lot of sub-ranges developed in a big way like the Kroot or Deathcore. Overall, I feel like Dark Mechanicum's got some pretty good odds to turn up in 11th edition, though I guess we'll wait and see on that front. In any case, that's just about it for this one. Hope you've enjoyed a roundup of coming releases and a bit of speculation as to what's going to come after. If they do wind up doing a big reveal show sometime around Warhammer Day, we're likely to find out more then. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you make of the current crop of fairly Space Marine heavy 40k releases, and what do you hope might turn up for the future? That's just about it for this one, though I'll just cycle back to the video sponsor and Futureproof terrain, if you're interested in their plastic terrain sets that can come pre-painted. For pros and cons of this one, I do feel like it checks a lot of on-paper boxes. It's got sculpted detail, can come pre-painted, you can take it down and put it up in a different format if you want to change things up or say terrain layouts change or something. It's pretty functional for playing 40k, and of course it's much cheaper than Games Workshop, not that that's particularly special out of third-party offerings. I say probably for bigger downsides is that it is pitching itself as one of the slightly higher end terrain sets out there versus the absolute cheapest stuff, so it is a little pricier than base MDF or some of the cheapest 3D printed or plastic versions. Otherwise, just from playing with it myself, and bear in mind that you do want some of the top roof extension bits to be able to cover the construction tabs in it, and while you can take it apart, I wouldn't really want to do it too often personally, as it still takes the time to assemble and deassemble. You absolutely could just glue it in place though I guess it's just nice to have the option on paper. In any case though, their sets are made out of these components basically and a few other expansion bits, and they can be put together and reconfigured to make a full table set like this. The prices seem to be $240 or $300 painted. A few of the paint schemes cost a little more or a little less, and it makes a fairly big terrain set with 4 big ruins and around about 8 small to medium ones. Should be fairly adequate for most games of 40k. They do have a whole ton of different options for paint schemes, some aiming for more civilized royal worlds, a fun sandbag style one for a World War world. Their Lost World one looks quite fun and overgrown, and there's a few more with some slightly trippier colours too. In any case, thanks to them for sponsoring this one. You can find their stuff linked down in the video description if you want to take a look at their store. That's it for this one though. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. If you'd like to support the channel and keep these videos coming, Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description below if you'd like to help support. Channel patrons get a few advantages, seeing certain videos early, occasional votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, an automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, the link's down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.